All right, let's dive into one of the most amazing objects ever launched into space. We're talking about a satellite with absolutely no electronics, no power source, nothing. Yet it completely changed the game for global communications. This is the incredible story of Project Echo. So picture this. It's the 1960s. You look up at the night sky and you see this brilliantly bright star cruising silently overhead. It's outshining almost everything else up there. That was Echo 1. It was a 10-story tall, perfectly round, shimmering balloon. And yeah, people called it the most beautiful satellite ever. And that's the real head-scratcher here, isn't it? At the end of the day, Echo is just a giant mirror floating through space, a totally passive object. So how in the world did this simple, beautiful balloon become one of the most important satellites in all of history? To really get its impact, we have to first understand what this thing actually was. And the idea itself was, beautifully simple, even if pulling it off was a huge challenge. So the key thing to remember is that Echo didn't do anything to the signals it got. It was literally a mirror for radio waves. A signal would shoot up from Earth, hit its reflective surface, and just bounce right back down to a different spot. But for that to work, the reflector had to be absolutely massive to get a strong enough signal back.
Now, why go through all this trouble? Well, we've got to remember what the world was like back then. Talking to someone across the globe instantly, that was pretty much the stuff of science fiction.
Before satellites, our whole world was connected by this crazy, complicated maze of cables running along the ocean floor. It was expensive, it was difficult, and it was super limited. So this idea of just bouncing a signal off something in orbit, it was mind-blowing but totally unproven. In fact, a lot of engineers were pretty sure it wouldn't work. A big theory at the time was that the Earth's ionosphere would just block or scatter any radio waves you tried to send up. So before they even built Echo, NASA had to prove the concept was possible by bouncing a voice signal off the biggest satellite they could find, which happened to be the Moon.
So, with the basic physics proven, NASA then ran into a series of what seemed like totally impossible engineering problems, and to solve them, they needed some truly brilliant outside-the-box thinking.
Okay, problem number 1, the materials. The balloon had to be enormous to work as a mirror, but it also had to be ridiculously lightweight to even get off the ground on the rockets they had back then. How do you possibly build something so huge, yet so light?
The solution is just wild. They used mylar plastic that was only 1/10 the thickness of a single human hair. Think about that for a second. This impossibly thin sheet was then coated with a vapor-thin layer of aluminum to make it shiny. Then, over 100 of these carefully shaped panels were painstakingly glued together to make the final sphere.
All right, so you've built your giant feather-light balloon. You've folded it neatly into a tiny can for launch. Now what? You're in the vacuum of space. There's no air. How are you going to inflate this thing without a pump?
And this is where the genius of the engineers just shines. Instead of air, the folded balloon was packed with little canisters of a powder called benzoic acid. Once it was released in space, the heat from the sun hit the powder and it sublimated. It turned directly from a solid into a gas. And that gas gently and perfectly inflated this massive balloon in just a few seconds. No pumps, no complex systems, just sunlight and some clever chemistry.
And the team was learning as they went. For instance, a giant balloon is a huge target for tiny meteorites. For Echo 1, the fix was pretty clever. They just carried extra powder that would keep sublimating to replace any gas that leaked out. But for Echo 2, they came up with an even better idea. A skin made of mylar sandwiched between aluminum foil. When it inflated, the skin stretched and hardened into a rigid sphere that would hold its shape even if it got dinged up.
So Project Echo was a massive success. It proved satellite communication could work, but its mission wasn't over. This simple balloon ended up giving scientists a ton of unexpected data that went way beyond just bouncing signals.
10 times. That's how much more accurate our maps of the Earth became. All thanks to Echo. By having ground stations in different places measure how long it took a signal to get to the satellite and back, they could use basic triangulation to figure out the exact distance between continents right down to a few meters. I mean, that was an absolutely unheard of level of precision.
Orbiting at about 1,500 kilometers up, Echo's huge size and low weight made it like a giant feather in space. It was super sensitive to all the little forces up there. This made it the perfect tool for a young NASA to study stuff like the long-term effects of atmospheric drag on a satellite's orbit.
And what they found was a total surprise. They thought Echo's orbit would slowly get lower because of drag from the tiny bits of atmosphere way up there. But what they discovered was that the main force acting on it wasn't drag at all.
It was the solar wind. The constant stream of particles from the sun was literally pushing the satellite around. This was one of the first real-world measurements of this effect, and that data became crucial for every space mission that followed.
So even though passive communication satellites didn't really become the norm, the legacy of this giant, beautiful balloon is just staggering. Its impact rippled out in ways that nobody could have possibly predicted.
First, it proved global satellite communication was possible, paving the way for the connected world we all live in today. And then, get this, the ground station antenna built to pick up Echo's faint signals, that same antenna was later used to discover cosmic microwave background radiation, the actual echo of the Big Bang. And even today, the advanced mylar materials they developed for this thing are still used in modern spacecraft.
You know, Project Echo is just this powerful reminder that sometimes the most elegant solution is also the simplest. It wasn't some complex supercomputer in the sky, it was a balloon. And it really makes you wonder, right? What seemingly simple, beautiful ideas are being worked on right now that might just lead to the next world-changing discoveries of tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in.